Hi everyone, and welcome to this piece discussion video, this time focused on the piece Warm from the series ILY2. ILY2 is an 8-piece series in the postmodern body of work that explores the ability of authentic human connection to transcend the means through which it's transmitted. Ultimately, this is a series about hope that explores those real-life instances where relationships that are forced to remain connected via technological means are not bound by those means. Rather, it's a series that examines when technology is merely a prefigurement for a real-life connection to take place later, or a facilitation of what would otherwise be a connection in real life between two people. For a more in-depth look at the series, you will find a link to the series overview in the description of this video. Now let's look at Warm specifically, which is the fourth piece in ILY2. Beginning with the title, it is very deliberately meant to be a very stark moniker. The series so far up to this piece has been using the titles to really explore conceptual aspects, and Warm is a bit more brazen in what it's saying on the outset. The literal implications of the title really speak to the fact that this piece is embracing the warmer tones that will come to truly characterize the ILY2 series from this point going forward into the remaining 5 pieces. And it's an entrance into this greater half. It is the latter half of ILY2. And as I said, this is a finite 8-piece series. And so Warm is very much the beginning of what becomes the latter part to eventually conclude. From the figurative standpoint, Warm obviously is referring to this embrace of humanity's warmth in contrast to technology's stark bleakness. There's obviously some tension when it comes to technology and humanity, especially when you consider the fact that technology is the unfeeling aspect in this instance. Also within the figurative side of the title is this idea of the warm embrace, that even just the thought of the other person, no matter how far, just creates that sense of warmth within us. And I'll explore that more when we get into the emotional aspects of this piece. Again, as I mentioned with Warm being the 4th piece, this is very much the turning point in ILY2. And it's not so much a turning point in terms of transition, but it's very much a part of the latter half. I deliberately created this series so that it was skewed towards the back end. And what I mean by that is we have the first 3 pieces making up this cold, anxious, slightly tense and uncertain period. And then at Warm and beyond, all 5 remaining pieces are considering more warm aspects, if you will, or more hopeful aspects of humanity overcoming the technology and the relationship really standing above the means through which it's transmitted, as I was stating in the introduction. So with that, now I want to look at the composition of this piece and just sort of the basic elements of it. Obviously, one of the immediate things to consider is the dimensions, which are increasing for the first time in the series, moving from 8 inches by 8 inches square to 10 inches by 10 inches square. And this is an idea to express that things are now less confined and that the gravity is also increasing. There's a sense that stakes are maybe higher, but in a good way, or that the figure and the idea is blossoming a little bit. And that's part of what I wanted to emphasize with the way the dimensions gradually begin to increase, beginning with Warm. The figure is found in a room that is bathed in a warm glow, and this is the introduction of the warm tones that are truly surpassing the colder values. The first time we're seeing this in ILY2. Obviously the figure is fully realized, and I wanted to create him in a sense that is very comforting. There's rolling fabric on the bed and the curtains are pulled back, and there's a lot of that very lush sort of imagery with this space. And the space itself is entirely composed in the rosy beige hue, which is one of the warm tones that are utilized in this series to really embrace that warm sense of human life underneath the cold, unfeeling technology or the dark uncertainty, and moving into a bit of a more warm sort of springtime atmosphere. There's another dissipating text box in this piece that's similar to the ones found previously in ILY2. In this case, it's lifting and flowing into the composition, and it's slightly moving towards the figure and not so much being a burden, but more melding into the composition as well. There is a slight photographic reference in the lower left picture plane of this piece. You'll notice that you can slightly see white space underneath, similar to what you could see in Wish, but far less. It's a connection to wish, but in some ways it's a reminder that this is a photograph. It's a very slight and subtle reminder that what we're looking at is being shared. It's an image that is being transmitted. Again, as I mentioned, the figure is rendered very fully and very detailed, and he is very balanced between the warm tones and the cool tones. There's a great sense of realism, and I wanted that to be echoed through the light of the space and back into the space itself, that the values are sort of bouncing back and forth. This warmth is coming from the figure and the room, and that there's an interplay there, that there's very much a harmony between the space itself and the figure. And I think this is a really good transition point to begin discussing the conceptual aspects of this piece. Again, this idea of warm, this idea of the warmth of life's presence, no matter how it is confined or constrained, that even though this is maybe a picture message being sent, even though this is a relationship that is having to stretch across the technological abyss, so to speak, it is no less alive and it is no less real. The way that the title Warm also speaks to this idea of recognizing that the other one is there, and that feeling we get from thinking about the interlocutor or the other person on the other side of the screen is really that moment of reciprocation. Warm is embracing that moment when we realize that yes, indeed, somebody really is there. And when we look at the text inside of the box, it's really a confirmation that indeed, somebody is right there. It's a reassurance, and this piece is really speaking to those moments when somebody is looking out for us and that there is somebody very much real and sincere. As I started to mention with the composition, I wanted this piece to embrace the idea of spring's sudden arrival, that it's sort of an immediate bloom, that we move from the cold winter tundra and all of a sudden we have the flowers beginning to bloom, the sun shining a bit brighter and longer, and that's a big reason why this piece is so fully brazen in its embrace of these warm tones. The space itself, again, very much alive, very much warm with those tones, wanting to hasten the seasonal metaphor. And I wanted the space to feel as alive as the figure, as I was describing with this interplay in the composition. This is the portion of the series that is now beginning to explore those sincere moments of human connection. And that's, as stated earlier, what I really wanted to begin in earnest with Warm. That text box, as I mentioned again, is referring to the consolation we find in the interlocutor. And the box itself is not intrusive. As I was describing with the composition, it's melting into the figure, and by no means is it necessarily intruding upon his form or disrupting his form. Rather, it's very much a part of the image in what I will hope is a very harmonious way. This interplay, again, between the space and the figure is meant to urge the viewer to an understanding of the harmony between the circumstances and the moment itself. That what actually is happening here is somebody is able to stay connected with somebody by way of a picture message, to reassure somebody, to offer that consolation by way of their interaction. And so this is very much an instance of, yes, technology is working for us, that we don't have to be afraid, that rather we can be grateful that we have this means. This is, again, a very good place to begin discussing the emotional impact of this piece, because I wanted there to be that sense of reassurance. I wanted there to be that sense of consolation. When we think of the warmth of the other person, when we think of the other person and experience that just general interior warmth, I wanted it to be filled with that sense of excitement, and that's what I wanted Warm to be. In the figure's expression is that sense of reassurance, but it's also that sense of solidity, that I wanted the figure to emanate something to the interlocutor that the viewer actually can also experience. I wanted it to almost elicit a smile even on the viewer, because we have maybe all had those moments where we feel reassured by a message or something from somebody we love that we know is real, and it can be really encouraging and really comforting. Again, this whole idea of the springtime beginning is obviously meant to have a great emotional impact too, that it's a sudden excitement, it's a sudden arrival that just sparks life inside of us and intrigue too, and we look forward to it and we anticipate it with joy. I wanted there to very much be a sense of steadfastness in this piece, that the figure is reassuring the interlocutor that yes, I am here, you don't have to be afraid. And it's a beautiful moment where technology is actually allowing somebody to communicate that despite distance, despite change of time, change of season, despite whatever it is, whether somebody's looking at this when it's immediately sent or down the road, that it's a reminder, maybe even a memento of somebody that truly does love you. Whether that be a relationship of intimacy or platonic, that it's just the reassurance of someone we love. I think I'll stop there. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about this piece. And ultimately, I hope that this allows you to have a deeper, more intimate connection with Warm. Please feel free to share this video with anybody else who might find it worthwhile or might benefit from connecting with the piece more deeply. And until the next one, thank you.